Hey everyone. Well, it's Monday. We made it. We made it through Monday through this tumultuous weekend. Certainly no lack of things to talk about. We're going to focus on the tech, though. I know there's a lot going on in your world, my world, all of our worlds. But tech as usual is front and center in it. And I think we're going to have some great discussions today. I got some great people to discuss it with us, some of our gang here of regulars. Let me introduce you to JP Morgenthal, Garima Bajpai, Stephen Foskett, and I guess he's still the man in the high castle, Mike Vizard. Gang, welcome.
I forget how that book ends, but I got a feeling it wasn't good.
Yeah, well, you might want to go watch. You can watch the miniseries, the video.
Ask ChatGPT. I'm sure it'll know.
Yeah, or just ask an AI. And if you don't like it, well, of course you don't like it, Michael. We'll make that better for you. But it's certainly, all kidding aside, gang members, I really feel like I'm living in the midst of history. And at some level, we all live through history because every day makes new history. But I can't help but feel that these are somewhat historic times that we're living through here, these last couple weeks, if you will. And for the technology and what's going on in our world, but what's going on in the broader world at large as well. And we'll try to stick to our subjects and mind our knitting, but I'm sure the world will, make their way into that. Mike, it was an interesting weekend, and I guess we're going to start off with, it became official when we had Cyber Command as part of DoD, right?
I guess. Well, the issue is, I think we're all sitting around now from a cybersecurity perspective, at least, waiting to see if this other shoe is going to drop. And Iran has demonstrated some significant capabilities in that regard over the years, and they have a huge ecosystem that they've built up around them, and we don't know what those folks are going to do. And some people seem to think that maybe, the lack of current leadership means it'll be a while before they get their act together, and others will say, well, it's just only a matter of time before, they get through some of the recent holidays and they're going to be back in full swing and all hell's going to break loose. But I mean, Alan, what's your assessment of the capabilities here? And, the cybersecurity folks clearly need to be on point.
I wrote a few articles regarding this on Security Boulevard over the weekend as stuff was breaking. So first of all, look, when your lead is 87 years old, chances are pretty good you probably have a succession plan in place. Now, they did take out a good chunk of leadership, but from what I'm seeing, leaders have already, there's already people leading the way, and Iran is certainly not sitting in, they're in mourning, but they're not sitting on their hands doing nothing. I think one has to suspect that there are cyber terrorists, cyber hacking, cyber attacks, nation state level cyber attacks in the hopper ready to go. And we'll probably be seeing them at some level as their physical military capability is degraded. I think cyber becomes their card, their ace card to play, and they're going to play it. There's no sense saving it. They're going to play it. Now, unfortunately, it comes at a terrible time for us in some ways because we have this, shutdown involving Department of Homeland Security and CISA. And then on top of that, there was a report this week that, we had an acting CISA director because the permanent director was never approved by the Senate. And there's a long history of, look, you don't put the right people in the right jobs. When stuff happens, it comes back to bite you. And it turns out this interim guy they had in there was a bit of a disaster, more than a bit. He was an effing disaster. And couldn't happen at the worst possible time for us. I just hope, though, that, look, private industry and the rest of our government have to be on vigilant guard here because things are going to happen, and I pray for the best.
Mhm. I would assume a couple of things are true here. One is we're probably attacking on the cyber front as aggressively as we did. So we might be taking out a lot of their capabilities as we speak. So we don't know what that is going to look like. But secondarily, I think it's going to be a while before they do respond because they are a theocracy and they have to put together a meeting to go elect the next Ayatollah, which is roughly equivalent to trying to elect the Pope. So everybody's got to get in a room and there'll be a lot of voting back and forth. So that might take them 3 or 4 weeks to kind of sort that whole thing out. But what I worry about is the incidental fire, right? They're going to try to attack, U.S. cyber capabilities and probably not succeed, but then they'll go after the secondary and incidental folks. And so it's going to be small businesses and other businesses out there that might be the collateral damage of this thing. JP, what do you think?
I tell you, this is a very specialized area, right? For knowledge. I'm sorry. Very special areas. I wish I had the depth to understand all the nuances of this. I feel like the only people who really have a full picture are sitting in Washington, D.C. Once you got me, this is not my area of specialization. I don't even want to delve into it, put a toe in the water.
I would also like to pitch in. It's not my specialization either, but I think what we have seen in the past is that, Mike, to your point, that of course, this also will invite a lot of deepfakes, disinformation, phishing attacks, because we are not waiting for the state sponsor, cyber crimes to happen. It's all the other things which we should be concerned about, right? And I mean, to what I would expect is that there will be a lot of defense ops in making when we see these kind of, repercussions over the time period.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, will people invest more in cybersecurity? Are they going to be a little more conscious, or do you think we're going to just wait?
I think people have to be on guard. But Mike, look, if you're going to be in a cyber fight, having Israel as your partner is probably not a terrible thing. They're pretty good at it, I hear. And you got to assume their offensive and they have plenty of offensive capabilities. Their offensive capabilities are also fully engaged because they're probably a little, maybe even more on the front line than we are. I think, though, to think that Iran is going to be in a holding pattern until they elect a new supreme leader is naive. They had to have plans in place. Your leader's 87 years old. You've lost how much of your leadership over the last couple months, years? There are contingency plans in place. They're not. This isn't like some backward kind of. Yes, they're a theocracy, but they ain't stupid, right? They're a sophisticated. And as I wrote in my article, who do we have to blame? Probably ourselves. I think Stuxnet and everything we've done to them since then made them sharper in terms of being a cyber relevant and cyber aware country and administration. The other thing you can't discount is anytime with Iran, you have the Hezbollahs, the Houthis, the Palestinian, all of the proxies that they've funded over the years. These also have cyber capability, these proxies. And cyber terrorism. Think about that. Cyber terrorism, attacking water supply or critical infrastructure or something that'll create terror. Right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be in the U.S. mainland, on the U.S. homeland. It could be anywhere in the world that maybe is not as hardened, right? they are lashing out the way they're lashing out at the whole Gulf right now, right? And the whole Arabian Peninsula. They're desperate. Desperate people do desperate things.
So question, Alan. You've been in the security industry for many years, and you watched it grow and emerge. So, can Iran accomplish this without social engineering? And what kind of social engineering opportunities do you think they have, given what's going on?
So
is it the brute force attack?
Yeah, no. So here's the thing: when you look at the axis of evil, right, and you prioritize them, certainly the Chinese groups that have been responsible for a lot of the low and slow attacks that have been so devastating and exfiltrating so much data over the years, the APTs, they're top of the line. The Russians have been playing this game for a very, very long time. But recently, like in the last 3, 4, 5 years, North Korea and Iran are probably the two up-and-comers in terms of, number one, just flat-out cyber capability. Number two, financing a lot of their regime and avoiding sanctions and so forth through cyber. And they've been exporting it too, right? So one, especially in the case of Iran, as I mentioned, with Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and all of their proxies. One is in Syria, in Iraq. They basically control Iraq, right? So the problem is you've got a very sophisticated cyber capability that's dispersed through a lot, like tentacles of an octopus. And trying to keep all of them, like where's the next thing coming from?
So here's something to think about then. First of all, it's naive to think that, like a child throwing a tantrum, they're all of a sudden going to get angry and throw these weapons and toys at us. They are consistently and actively pursuing these avenues and have been for years.
Yep.
This is not new. This is not something they're just turning on now in revenge. So the question is, do they have anything new that they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, so the fact of the matter is, Iran and Persia historically were never eager to be the front and center of a fight. They'd much rather sit back and let their proxies do things and live in the shadows, so to speak. But now you literally have a regime with a gun to its head. You have a regime that's been decapitated. You have a regime that's fighting for its life. Not just, it's one thing when you're worried about what those poor people in Lebanon or Gaza are going to do. It's another thing when they're worrying about their own children. And so they're going to be a lot more desperate, and I think they will empty the kitchen sink out here.
Stephen, there's this whole notion now of asymmetric warfare, and there's this whole notion of, cyber is kind of the fifth dimension of war. I mean, this could go on for years, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily, this isn't going to be, even if we were one and done, so to speak, and declared victory in 30 days, it seems like we'll be fighting this forever.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my opinion. And there does seem to be a real asymmetry here in terms of what's going on. I mean, the U.S. is going in there with conventional weapons, and Israel is going in there with a lot of conventional weapons, bombs and warplanes and missiles and that sort of thing. Iran is responding with a lot of conventional weapons. But of course, as you mentioned, as Alan talked about, there are a lot of other aspects to this. And the asymmetry here is essentially that a country like Iran can strike back in many different ways that don't necessarily involve, ballistic missiles and anti-aircraft guns and things like that. And, they don't have to attack everywhere to succeed. All they have to do is find some angle, some place to attack. And there's another aspect of asymmetry that's important as well. Iran is actually a very progressive culture, a very internet-connected culture. But, internally. And as of about a month ago, most of the public internet in Iran was shut down, and they've been actively moving against any unauthorized access, including jamming Starlink dishes and that sort of thing, in order to make sure that nobody has access. And yet Israel and the United States and the West are extremely connected. I think that it's safe to say that we all live incredibly connected lives. And that's what makes cyber warfare more interesting to me, because essentially it opens up more attack surfaces. As you mentioned, Alan, certainly there could be utilities, attacks on that sort of thing. There could be just disruptions to our daily connected lives. If there was DDoS attacks, which Iran has indeed conducted in the past against banks or against, frankly, anything that we interact with on a daily basis, that could interfere and cause real disruption and pushback from Western cultures that maybe the Iranian people may be a little bit more prepared to accept, because they've been accepting internet interruptions and disruptions to their daily lives for many years, as their regime has sort of flipped that big switch on and off. So I think there is an interesting angle here. I think it's a concerning angle as well. There could be other sorts of attacks in the West, again, that don't involve, jets and bombs and missiles, but involve, cyber.
I'll tell you what about all of this is that either side is going to launch something at the other side aimed at some sort of cyber attack and lose control of it. And it's just going to replicate everywhere through our networks, and all kinds of havoc may ensue. And it may very well come from something that, technically is on our side, but once let loose, we lose control of it.
Desperate people do desperate things.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to watch that. But there's another angle I just want to bring out, and then we can move on. Iran is a country, this isn't some rinky-dink 6 million, 4 million people country. There's something like 90 or 80 or 90 million people in Iran. And there is a very, very wide diaspora of Persians, of Iranians throughout the world, especially here in the US. You go to parts of Great Neck in New York, it's Little Persia. You go to LA, there's huge Iranian populations. Canada, Europe, right? The Persians have always been a worldly people, right? And we don't know how many embedded sleeper cells of potential cyber terrorists, or heaven forbid, terrorists, can be activated as a result of coming out of this. And this is why it's a terrible time for CISA to be on the balls of its butt, because we need to be ever vigilant right now. That's I think the point. We got to move on though to our next topic. Let's keep our fingers crossed and pray for the best, and we'll follow it. Mike, lots going on with Anthropic this weekend and the end of last week.
This whole thing is turning into a soap opera. It's right up there with some of those shows that you watch on cable that go on forever, where there's all this internecine battle between executives. But the latest is Anthropic told the Pentagon that it wasn't going to comply to its requests for, being good citizens in the world and not having their technology used to attack people and do all kinds of surveillance. And sure enough, OpenAI said, well, sure, we'll sign up for that program, and was replacing Anthropic right behind them, even though there was some noise out of OpenAI saying that it was originally sympathetic to the Anthropic position, but not enough, I guess, to turn down the contract from the Pentagon. And this whole thing has been blowing up, and guess what? Anthropic is like the most popular downloaded application now from the Apple Store and probably the Google Store as well. And it seems like maybe this is good for business. JP, what's your take on what's going on here?
Oh, at least now I can speak to something I know. So you call me on that other one, I'm like, look, man, I'm not sticking my toe in that deadly water. But I've been watching this closely, and I'm actually impressed with Anthropic's handling of this. It's hard to be an executive of a company, really a startup. I don't care that they're billions of dollars. They're still a startup, right? I mean, it's fairly new. company. They're trying to obviously, build a product that's mature and robust, and they have to, worry about the competition, which is, really tight in this area, right? Although we've talked before on this show about how it's not a one and done. You don't pick one and stick with it. You probably have multiple LLM providers that you're using simultaneously, but there are ones that your business processes and your workflows will become heavily reliant on. And of course, every one of them, Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, they all want to be that organization that's chosen. So it's tough right now to stand up and say, I'm not going to take money to do what's right. But I think it is so important for somebody to be willing to do it at this point in time. I posted on LinkedIn over the weekend as I was going through Spaceship Earth at Epcot for the 100th, 150th time because I'm an annual pass holder, right? Something hit me that never hit me before. It's every one of those little scenic things that you see along the way is about us advancing the speed at which we convey information to one another. And I don't know why it all of a sudden hit me that way. But, it takes you through paper and pen and type press, and then you get to the newspaper and the newspaper press, and then wire, and then, TV and computers, right? Every time what we did was we over the years, we continually advanced the speed at which we convey information, ultimately leading to the epitome, which is the internet, which was an unguided and with little guardrail environment that became, in my opinion, a danger zone right now for dissemination of information. Freedom of Information, Sharing Act, all that other stuff, the free internet, never considered the impact of social media and how it could be used by bad actors against our society. And right now, I think it's one of the most dangerous weapons on the planet. And now we're in our next race. We're finally actually entering our next race, which is to have machines understand that information that we've worked so hard to share with each other so quickly, right? And now, if we don't have guardrails, the right guardrails on that, the effect will be devastatingly worse than what the internet represents right now with regard to the potential for bad actors.
Mm-hmm. So here's my problem with the whole concept. I mean, I don't disagree with you philosophically. I just don't see any way to implement meaningful guardrails here that are going to be worth a damn. So, I mean, it's just kind of Garima. Is this just the way the world is going to be?
I think we are living in a world of paradox, right? We need a lot of deep strengthening of industry collaboration on, defense of, as we mentioned earlier, as well as, we need the AI models to be more trustworthy. And what this has done for the longer run, it erodes trust, right? And what happens in the background is that now there is a race of fragmented global adoption of AI models. Not only this is particularly what we are talking about in the DoD and the defense network, but it doesn't limit there, right? So the gold standard will start to kind of also spread into other industries, right? Other critical infrastructure segments. So it is very interesting to see how it kind of boils down to the fact that we probably will see endless vendor audits, for example, in several enterprises. I especially work for critical infrastructure space, so I feel that pressure already itself, right? And it also demands for a larger collaboration. I mean, eroding trust like this would mean that enterprises will also backlash for AI free enterprises, right? So how should we go about navigating these challenges is a question to be answered in the near future. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball at hand, but I think as technologists, as people who have been driving change for several years, I see that there will be a lot of evolution happening as we speak on this topic.
So
Steven, is all this going to wind up in court someday? Because there's going to be basically, you could argue that there's a certain amount of restraint of trade being applied here, right?
Well, no, the government could do what they want. I don't think
Let
Anthropic could go to
Steven
court.
answer. You keep
Go ahead,
jumping in, Steven.
Yeah, so that's a good point. It's different for the Pentagon to say we choose this solution over that solution for reasons, and that's how we are, than for the Pentagon to say Anthropic is a threat to national security, because that essentially says that Anthropic is not welcome at any government procurement, and in fact may be unwelcome in a lot of private procurement as well, which is a pretty big hammer to wield in this situation, especially when, what I've read about the background of this is that essentially it was kind of a setup, that Altman and his investors went to the federal government and said, hey, theoretically, if you're going to buy Anthropic, why don't you ask them whether you can use that for autonomous drone targeting or domestic surveillance, which they knew was illegal. And the Pentagon said, oh, okay, we should probably ask that, and went back to Anthropic and say, hey, Anthropic, would you allow us to do this? And so it was a setup. So Anthropic, of course, had to say no, because that's illegal. And the OpenAI agreement is kind of interesting because, to Garima's point here, essentially, and actually to what Alan said as well just now, essentially what OpenAI announced is, yeah, we won't let them do those things with our tech either, except we'll let them do anything legal. And so the government decides what's legal. And so
the government doesn't decide what's legal.
Yeah.
The courts decide what's legal. The government does what it wants until the court tells them it's illegal. And that's an important distinction here. The government is not the ultimate purveyor of what's legal. The government, right, it's our courts that have to decide whether a government's act is legal or illegal. When we allow the government itself, not the courts, not the judiciary, to decide what's legal or illegal, that's how you wind up in tyranny. Now, some may argue we're already there, but I'm not here to argue that today. But let me weigh in. I've let everyone talk. Look, there's so many delicious angles to this story, right? You've touched on some of them. One is, yes, I was one of those people a year and a half or 2 years ago when the full page ad in the New York Times came out, signed by 100 of the leading scientists, that said we should put a moratorium on AI because it could be dangerous. I said, hogwash, bah humbug, trains left the station, no one's going to stop it. Here I am sitting here today with my tail between my legs saying, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there are some ethical considerations that we should take into consideration before just marching forward into the night, into the darkness of the night. That's number one. Number two, a private company can license their software any way they want. If a government or a user doesn't want to use that software as a result, they're free not to use it. But to take out this cudgel of declaring them a software supply chain is the act of a 5-year-old petulant child. And there's no place for that in this world. That's number two. Number three, you got to believe in karma or the force or whatever you want to call it. But like Obi-Wan told Darth Vader, if you strike me down, I'll be more powerful than you can imagine. And I think we're seeing that with Claude Rise. I went out this weekend and bought a year's subscription just because it was the right thing to do. Right? We cannot. Now, there are going to be some who say, and you know who these people are. Under the Biden administration, they allowed the social media companies to censor the right wing. First of all, I don't necessarily believe that. But secondly, that's a different situation than whether or not you want to procure this software or not. right? And there's no place for it here. As to slippery Sam Altman, what do you expect from him? He has shown his colors 100 times over. This is the Pied Piper of AI. He's going to do whatever he can to try to justify. They just raised, what was it, another $110 billion or whatever, and they still hemorrhage money like someone who's had their jugular veins cut. So, you can't expect slippery Sam not to have his spots. He does what he does. Do we need to pull the cord? Do we need to have a step back? I'd like to say yes. Will it happen? No. But we need people like the Amodi. I believe it's his brother and sister who started Anthropic, right? The Darius Amodi is Dario is the CEO. We need people like Amodi who are willing to take a stand for ethics, who are willing to take a stand to do right. Where it goes, I don't know, but I commend them, I support them, and I know a lot of you people out there do too.
Yeah, but I also want to add one more thing, which I have been observing, because when we talk about all these DoD negotiations, with all due respect to the defense people in the US and all the due respect for the technologists who are actually driving this change, but think about this, what traditionally these people were procuring. They were like procuring missiles, tanks, aircrafts. The process itself is not adapted to this kind of a technological shift. The supply chain risks are not clearly vetted. They are not enabled by, there is only a pocket of people who are aware of these risks. Maybe they can do a proper due diligence on it, but it calls for a larger kind of shift in how we kind of develop these capabilities for the future. Where is the process? I mean, if there are legal implications, how do we fight it out? Because the process itself is not adopted, right?
I just come back to this one point, though. It's like, so we are the United States military defending the freedoms that we and our forefathers have fought so hard for, and now we're letting AI just take those away and then claiming that it's part of the defense of our freedoms. It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Look, it's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a mother or father who's had their child kidnapped on a public street would love to have that technology active to rapidly identify the kidnappers and apprehend them. Sorry, in this story, we all want to support that. But you look how this federal government has deployed ICE as a force. Now, I'm not judging ICE is necessary, ICE is good, they put untrained people on the streets. Now, had they put them through a Quantico training program and made sure they understood constitutional rights and dealt with warrants appropriately and didn't just take orders like Gestapo from their bosses and not knowing whether they're lawful or unlawful orders, then that would be a different story. So they have proven they are unable to deploy technology like this in a reasonable and respectable or legal manner. And that is the reason why, at this point, we can't allow them to use it.
Absolutely, JP. And Mike, to your point, let me tell you this, and you learned this lesson in high school, I'm sure. A nation that lives under the rule of law shall perish if they don't follow the rule of law.
There you go.
Let's move on.
To JP's point, there's plenty of opportunity to use exigent circumstances to address an issue like a kidnapping. We just don't need to do it en masse all the time in real time and create this massive surveillance state.
There you go. That's exactly the point.
It.
Right.
All right. Hey, I will go. Is that a knock at my door? All right, let's move on here and talk about drone wars. Like we don't have enough wars. Mike, what's this one about?
Well, it turns out that this latest circumstances that we've been talking about in Iran is also playing out all over the world, places like Colombia and even our own borders. And interestingly enough, there's been a lot more investments as a result in anti-drone technology. So people have started to say, here's all this drone stuff, and that's interesting, and they're getting cheaper. And even cartels in Mexico are building drones now and using them to surveil particular DEA agents, and it's just getting a little bit crazy out there. But it's interesting because, and Stephen, I'm going to come to you with this, but it kind of reminds me of, World War II history. We rolled out all these great tanks, and the next thing you know, we had bazookas and Panzerfausts, and the tanks couldn't go into the cities because they were just going to get blown up. And I got a feeling that this is going to play out here with drones, where we're going to find some cheap anti-drone technology. What do you think?
Yeah, that's it. Well, this is the history of a lot of things, and certainly the history of warfare is that each new technological advancement really changes the game entirely. And you mentioned World War II. Battleships in World War II, they were a huge military capability, and the entire world was racing to build battleships until they found that they were completely pointless and have been entirely abandoned since the 1950s, apart from Reagan bringing them back from mothballs in the 1980s for no particular reason. And actually, Trump proposed a new one now, again, for no particular reason. But if we think about what's happened on the battlefield and actually off the battlefield to the point of asymmetric and guerrilla warfare and terrorism, drones have really changed the game. If you look at what's happened, of course, in the Russian war in Ukraine, the drone capabilities there have really shifted the whole way that wars are fought. The fact that they have just this incredible proliferation of small and mid-size loitering drones, first-person perspective, inexpensive drones, it essentially means that the whole battlefield is shut down for a large part during the day because no one dares go outside. And to your point on tanks, it's made tanks just completely ridiculous. I mean, there's these porcupine tanks with protrusions out of them to stop the drones. It really has changed everything. Now, I should point out that one country that is on the leading edge of developing drones is Iran. Okay. They have actually been deploying military drones since the 1980s, and their Shahed drone is one of the top drones in terms of the number produced and the number used in combat globally. And Iran was also on the forefront of developing this sort of one-way kamikaze drone concept, as opposed to what the U.S. wanted to do, which was to build big, expensive, basically unmanned fighter planes and unmanned bombers that could, do really kind of amazing things. And the U.S. has a bunch of these that can do pretty amazing things. But we should also point out that drones are more than just airplanes. There's other types of drones. Ukraine has successfully used drone ships against Russian ships. There are other types as well, including ground-based. And all of these have to be countered in some way because all of these change the battlefield in a really incredible way. And I think we're about to find that out in this Iranian conflict, just how different the battlefield is. So how do you counter them? Well, you can jam them, which doesn't work very well now that we have fiber optic drones and autonomous drones. You can try to shoot them down, which is pretty hard to do, though there's actually been some successful tests and some questionable tests of, for example, the laser in San Antonio that's now shot down a party balloon and a friendly drone. And the third thing that you can do is you can actually do drone-on-drone warfare, which is something that Ukraine has been showing us is possible as well. So there are ways of doing this, but I don't think it's going to be a one-size-fits-all. Just like submarines changed warfare, just like nuclear weapons changed warfare, all of these capabilities mean that you have to have a whole range of counter capabilities in order to take them on.
Yeah,
what does it mean for manned aircraft? For military aircraft? Why spend $110 billion on the F-35 per copy of whatever it is?
Mm-hmm. See, all I know about drones is they make really pretty sky shows.
So are we heading towards some bad Star Trek episode I remember where they landed on a planet and people were just reporting to get vaporized because the machines were fighting the wars, and then they just tallied up the casualty rates at the end? How absurd is this going to be?
But
Garima,
it
what we,
also changes the way we see warfares, right? I mean, if you think about this, for example, FIFA or small events or micro events, I mean, there are disruptions happening everywhere through drones. And I am essentially interested in anti drone technology, because that is where the cyber hat comes in. And, I'm more interested into seeing that, how are we moving away from RF jammers to laser rifles, for example, and other kind of technologies. What I feel is more interesting for cyber professionals to um, like professionals like us to go into more detail about how we can enable or evolve this technology in some kind of defense hubs to ensure that we do our contributions in the right way.
absolutely. Guys, we're about out of time. It's only Monday.
My prediction is we're going to reinvent the, what were those things called in medieval days? The trebuchet, and we're going to start throwing rocks at the drones. So there you go.
That would be a low-tech way of dealing with them.
That is one of the things they do. They call it kinetic-based attacks. I think they use sort of tubes that fire self-propelled projectiles. They call them guns.
What a great invention. Anyway, guys, certainly just some light reading for today, huh? Interesting times indeed. JP, Garima, Stephen, Mike, thanks for joining. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's show. We'll be back tomorrow, God willing, with more. There's a lot going on, and we can't wait to talk about it. But in the meantime, we do have Techstrong TV immediately replaying, immediately following this. Stephen, I believe we have a field day this week.
Next week, March 11th and 12th, we're going to be doing some Cloud Field Day. We're going to have some pretty cool stuff showing up there, including some community presentations, which I always enjoy because you never know what somebody's going to bring in to share with the world. So check that out on the Techstrong TV.
Excellent. All right. Until then, this is Alan Shimel. Thanks very much. We're out.